Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Music Lab podcast. My name is Dogg, and I'm so excited to be back with all of you for another episode of the podcast. Today, we have Sam Calagione, all the way from Maine, the CEO and founder of Dogfish Head. Welcome, my friend. How are you?
I am wonderful. This is Kismet when dog and dogfish head collide.
Who will prevail?
Both of us, I hope.
It's like Outlast. You watching that show on Netflix?
No, is that a good one?
It's pretty good, yeah. What people will do when you haven't eaten in 30 days.
Oh, geez, I got to see that. That's never happened to me, though.
So I want to, some interviews that I do with bands and music professionals, I kind of start from, the beginning, or sometimes I start, in present tense. But with you, you guys just celebrated 31 years of Dogfish. When I say that to you, what does that mean?
It makes the gray hairs on my chin tingle because, I've never really had another job. I started working on the business plan, after graduating from college. I went to New York City and was taking some writing courses, working at a beer bar. Not knowing it was a beer bar, I just went in to get a job at a bar, but it was a first generation craft beer bar, and I fell in love with good beer. And within 6 months, bought a homebrew kit and started writing the business plan for Dogfish. So this, I've been really lucky to make my passion my vocation the entire way. So time flies when you're having fun or 60-minute IPA.
They say that living in New York City in the 90s was just a heyday. Like, talk about that experience for you. Was it?
Oh, it was amazing. I mean, just seeing shows and seeing like Jeff Buckley at Cine and all the jam bands. All like Blues Traveler and Spin Doctors playing tiny rooms there, and I just got really lucky. I moved in with these guys we had a mutual friend, and they happened to be in a group, a comedy group at NYU called The State. And right when we moved in together, they got greenlit to do a show on MTV. So, we were hanging out with all the folks on MTV. Craig Wedren from Shudder to Think became a good friend from that era. And it's like full circle because a bunch of the guys, they had a great career, made movies like Wet Hot American Summer and Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Reno 911, and now a bunch of them are traveling as a band called the Middle Aged Dad Jam Band, and they sometimes travel with Weird Al Yankovic and a bunch of other cast of characters. So, I've been really lucky to have all these creative people as part of my life since I started homebrewing.
Well, you say it's a brewery with a music problem. I'm sure my listeners are going to, when they see this episode, they're going to be like, well, why the hell is Dog having a brewery like owner? But like, talk about like why you have a music problem.
Well, I mean, I grew up kind of in the middle of nowhere. I was born in Queens in New York City, but my parents moved to like the hills of Western Massachusetts when I was 2 years old. But I always proudly say I'm from New York, and being nowhere near a city up, on the border of Vermont, I was the one thing that made me really lucky is again this is the '90s, and to quote the great Minneapolis punk band the Replacements, that they have a song called "Left of the Dial," and it's all about all those indie and college stations that you'd find between like 88 and 91 on your FM dial. And I living in Western Mass, I could get the high school and radio stations for Hampshire College, UMass, Smith, Amherst. So I would spend my nights as a preteen just wandering the dial, and I'd hear like a hip hop show from two kids from the Bronx that were at UMass, and then I hear a punk rock show by these crazy women at Smith, and it made me realize there were all these genres of music out there that weren't just top 40, and that really kind of just informed journey as a music lover.
Do you remember what you listened to when you guys made that trek down to Delaware?
What do you mean? Which trek down to Delaware?
Well, like when you decided to move from when you decided from New York City to move down to Delaware, do you remember what you were listening to, what your soundtrack was?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it was a big. There was a song that we ended up using for when we did a show on the Discovery Channel by the Replacements called "Beer for Breakfast." But I remember the first day I plugged in my brewing system in coastal Delaware, and it was boom. The first day I was actually a professional brewer. The first, and I try to always listen to front to back albums in the brew house. And the first one was B1000 by Guided by Voices, and so that was a full circle moment when we got to collaborate with Robert Pollard and the band maybe 12 years ago on Beer Thousand. I think it was like the 20th anniversary of that epic album. And so I definitely remember that as the first album we played in the brew house.
Can you share a conversation that you had with Robert that you can share with the audience that was
Yeah, so my son's now as big a music head as I am, and we share a love of Grateful Dead and punk rock. And he has I kid him that he has the musical. He's 25-year-old sous chef at a fancy restaurant up here in Maine, but he has the musical taste of like a 64-year-old environmental lawyer. You know, he's like Dylan and Fish and stuff like that. But I remember when Robert Pollard and Guy by Voices came and played Dogfish. I took him for a tour through the brewery, and Robert Pollard walked right up to the bottling line, and we were bottling the Miles Davis beer that we did called Bitches Brew, and it comes in a giant 750 ml champagne bottle, and he just grabs it off the bottling line. Totally, there it
see
is.
that one?
Holy shit! You're giving me flashbacks, dog.
Oh yeah.
So he grabbed that bottle right off the bottling line and just started pounding it. And then, he got on stage like 2 hours later, and the show it was too big to play in our room. So I rented out an old uh, theater in Milton that hadn't been open for music. It had only been open for, movies. And it's an old theater. So Guy by Voices plugs in, turns their amps to 11. The room's vibrating so much that the gold leaf paint on the ceiling is chipping off to the bass sounds. So it looks like we were all standing like a snow globe. We're all drinking our faces off, and paint's falling through the room as they played. And Robert Pollard was just kept passing a bottle of tequila to me from the stage, and he fell off the stage that night. They set up a full service bar on the stage, the band, and my son after the show got a poster signed by Robert, and Robert forgot that he also signed one for my son before the show. And on the car ride home, my son was looking at both of them, and he said, "Dad, how come the poster Robert Pollard signed after the show looked like a person's heartbeat that went into cardiac arrest, or just flatlined after like two bumps in it, because he'd been having such a good time on stage last night. I don't think he could write anymore."
I mean, that's a good segue. Do you have a piece of, music that you have, like an artifact or whatever that you're most proud of, like either a poster or an instrument or
Yeah, probably. Geez, I could tell you so many. Like the most prolific artist that I have paintings of that's from the music world is a musician named John Langford, who's in the famous first gen UK punk band the Mekons, coming out of Leeds, England in the late 70s. And Fear and Whiskey is an album I'd recommend to your listeners, by the Mekon. So I got a lot by him, but maybe the favorite is here in my cabin in Maine. I got a painting of a diver, like a 19th century diver, that was painted by Shane MacGowan from the Pogues, and I bought it at a gallery. He had a show. I just missed his wife was at the show, and this is a year before he died. And so the gallery said, "Oh, you just missed Shane's wife," and I was like, "Well, I think I'm going to buy this painting." He's like, "Funny story she told me about that painting is that Shane MacGowan took acid and was listening to the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds when he painted that, and he cracked the 33 and a half album of Pet Sounds and used a hammer and cracked it into little shards and started eating it. He loved the album so much when he was on LSD that he wanted to ingest Pet Sounds so it became part of his body. And he did that while he was painting the painting that hangs in our kitchen above my stereo system. So that one's probably the dearest to my heart.
That's awesome. That's such a cool story. So,
Yeah.
when you're starting out, one of the pillars of the company was original music. And I commend you for that because, for anyone that doesn't know the coastal Delaware area and like the coastal towns there, 90% of the bars and restaurants, it's cover bands, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you guys set out to deliberately just do original music. Talk about like how much you think that was part of your success.
Yeah, I mean, and so yeah, as you said, it was one of the pillars. In fact, our sort of holy trinity was from the day we opened as the smallest commercial brewery in America in 1995. We said our rallying cry was original beer, original food, original music. And so, as you mentioned, at beach towns up and down the East Coast, Jimmy Buffett cover bands are a dime a dozen, and we had certainly had that in Coastal Delaware. And we said, you know what, no, we're gonna make we're gonna do something where we're gonna say only invite people where over 90% of what music they played was their own songs. So, and we would have local acts that would, kick ass. Sometimes some would implode on stage, but then we'd get like a lot of acts, national acts on their way up or on their way down. So, we had the Strokes and Geese and Goose on their way up, and then we had PM Dawn and Vic Chestnut on rest in peace on their way down or out. So we had a whole litany of artists from across so many different genres, and it's super cool to me. We have a whole wall as an homage to all the bands that played Dogfish that kind of made it, whether it was Japanese Breakfast or Chicano Batman. So yeah, it's a big part of our DNA. And so as we evolved from not just booking original bands, but to collaborating with them, it really kind of helped establish our bona fides as real music fans to talk to, Miles Davis's family about, having Nathan and the Zydeco Cha-Chas play our stage, and there was an overlap of someone they knew in that band, or Preservation Hall Jazz Band play our stage, and so it created real connections with musicians, and that led to really deep collaborative projects where it wasn't just about them on the stage, but literally envisioning and creating beers together and labels together with so many artists. That has been really central to our brand's distinction among 10,000 beer brands in the country, but also to our success.
Yeah, and I mean, Sam, I remember when I worked at the pub, like the original pub,
Yeah.
there was an electricity, there was an energy when bands played at that pub. Like talk about that, like experience for a guest at the pub.
Yeah, I mean that room, as you know very well, was very small, very intimate, low ceiling. Maybe we get 140 people in there on a good day, and but the sound was wonderful. It was a very warm wood because it was all wood with wood rafters, and it was just a sweet spot of sound. And we would ply the musicians with free beer all afternoon while they were loading in, and make sure they would go home with a shit ton of. We had more beer than money in those days, so we were very liberal with the alcohol on the way in and on the way out, which made for some wonderfully loose gigs on our stage. And the stage was only like 12 inches off the ground, and we would pull the tables out and put them upstairs. So the audience and the acts were essentially in this great equilibrium, and it was very personal and passionate. So yeah, I mean, I can remember so many shows where afterwards the artists would say, "I haven't played a room this small in 5 years, 3 years, or whatever, but I had an absolute blast, and thank you for letting us come and play." And I used to let the artists stay in my house when I couldn't afford hotel rooms, and so There are some crazy nights back at home of keeping the party going with like Will Oldham, who records as Bonnie Prince Billy. The Handsome family from Chicago would stay at my house, and so yeah, we there's no separation of church and state when it came to how we embraced the artists that came through Dogfish Head.
Well, and I feel you. We've started to house some bands and artists too that have been coming through town because, as you know, man, it like the number one thing for artists now, it's the travel costs and like hotels are so expensive. And if you need, three or four rooms, for your, the band and your tour manager and whoever else, your sound guy, like it really adds up.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I have so much heart for touring musicians or just musicians in general right now, and then, when you put the economics of a world that's shifted to primarily streaming into that mix, it becomes even more challenging. So if I love an album, I'm very lucky that the brewery's been successful enough that I don't need to worry about, can I pay my electric bill at my house this month? So if I love an album, my wife's given me permission every month I can go out and buy that album on vinyl because that is the way to buy music in a way that usually gets the most percentage of that purchase into the artist's pocket versus the streaming services that line sort of the pockets of the executives and shareholders that own them.
So when the original pub closes and we design 2.0, I know obviously you had a huge influence on 2.0, but how much from a music standpoint did you think about 2.0?
Yeah, for those of you listeners that haven't gotten to visit Dogfish Head's music room, it's in downtown Rehoboth Beach. It's on the same piece of property that our original beautiful little wooden pub was, but that pub was really antiquated. It was super hot, like 110 degrees to work in the kitchen because we cook over a wood grill and wood oven. It gets hot in there, so it was very uncomfortable. Even though it was a lovely place to drink beer in and listen to shows, it was really uncomfortable for our coworkers. So we bit the bullet maybe 8 or 9 years ago, built from the ground up, state of the art, built new pub. It had no more seats than the old pub. It seats the same amount of people, but has a really comfortable air conditioned kitchen for my coworkers, and then a way more elaborate stage than the first one, a true stage. So when you walk in there, you can tell it was a room that was purpose designed for live music shows, and the stage really is the centerpiece. Now, if we're not having a show and there's a World Cup match on, we'll put other stuff on the big screen on the stage, but we shut all the screens off and give the artists the respect when we have live music on that stage.
Yeah. So it is funny because getting back to the original pub, like, from you living in New York City to going down to coastal Delaware, the pub had a very New York City kind of like dive bar, like that kind of music venue vibe. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I mentioned the jam bands in New York. There was a small club called Wetlands that had a very funky interior, and I became good friends with the owner, Pete Shapiro, who also owns Relics magazine, and he owns all the Brooklyn Bowls. And he's a great friend, but I did rip off some of the more sort of quixotic and down and dirty graffiti-ish vibes from places like Wetlands and CBGB's to start Dogfish Head.
Yeah. So is there a show that you saw at Dogfish that really stands out to you personally?
I'll tell you one that stood out in like a bad way, and one that
Yeah.
uh, stood out in a great way. In a great way would be uh, having the Modern Lovers play Dogfish, and literally, I mean, other than the Velvet Underground or the Ramones, I don't think there's an artist that that personified the birth of punk quite as much. So that one was like meaningful, existential as a punk rock lover to have him and the band on my stage, our stage. But then another crazy one was randomly we had these Spanish or speaking folks, very handsome, eloquent Spanish speaking folks show up and say, "Hey, we've heard you guys have booked all these famous national artists. We are the Gypsy Kings, and we have a night off, and we're here on vacation in Delaware after playing Philly or New York." and we would love to take your stage for $1,000 for an acoustic set. And I was like, holy shit, that's so cool. And I looked, I did at least look, the internet existed, and I looked and saw that the Gypsy Kings really did play in Philly or New York the night before these guys were here. So we said, fuck it, we put the show on. We took flyers all around town because we had no time to promote the show. And they played an amazing set, just three guys and their flamingo guitars and stuff. But the next morning I got to the brewery and I'm opening up, and this is still in the era when there were fax machines, so it must have been around 98 or 99. And this fax comes through with like Sony or EMI letterhead, some big record label, and they're like, we understand that you promoted a show last night by the Gypsy Kings. Those people were not the Gypsy Kings. And so it was like a fake Gypsy Kings band that was going around the country doing fake shows, but they were such good musicians that people believed it. And I just thought it was hilarious that they played as the Gypsy Kings because they were really like gypsies and they were kings at their subterfuge.
Well, they're nothing like the pain relievers.
No, no, thankfully for them, they're not. Yeah, the Pain Relievers, that's the name of my beer geek hip hop band that I'm in with our longest tenured brewer, Brian Selders. We like to say we're probably the finest beer geek hip hop band of our generation. We're also the only beer geek hip hop band of our generation.
I mean, what was it like to play on stage as the pain relievers? I mean, it had to be a thrill for you, man, right?
Yeah, it was, and still we just played at the Craft Brewers Conference, just a three-song set in Philly like 2 months ago. But
Nice.
the absolute pinnacle of our career was the same night that it was probably uh, the absolute bottom of what's the artist that does? Oh, she likes to do the Wild Thing, West Coast rapper. Oh shoot, remember the song Wild Thing? She
Yeah,
likes
Tone Loc, right?
Tone Loc,
Yeah.
yeah. So the Pain Relievers got to open for Tone Loc at a beautiful theater, I think in Portland, Oregon, or Seattle, and we love Tone Loc was awesome, and his rider was what he wanted in his green room was uh, uh, wings from Hooters and every different colored Gatorade. We love that as a rider. So now the Pain Relievers ask for that wherever we play. We play, and there's a great video that somebody took of us going off the stage and Tone Loc going on the stage, and they they say, "Hey, Tone Loc, what do you think of the Pain Relievers?" And he goes, "Oh, they're really nice guys." He'd listen to us play, sing our hearts out, and he tried to say something nice, which the only thing he could say nice about our rapping skills was that we were nice guys. But we'll take it.
He's a class act all around.
Tone Loc, people, so good.
So,
So yeah, that was fun, and we've done. If people go to YouTube and look up "Pain Relievers," the last word spelled V A Z at the end, you'll see some really fun music videos that we've done throughout the years.
so I mean, you've met a lot of people in your career. Is there a musician that when you met him or her that it was like you had like a fanboy moment?
Oh yeah, I mean, so many. You know, I would say Hall of Famer, Rock and Roll Hall of Famer Joan Jett was existential for me because that was the first concert I ever saw, and then I got to interview her. I do a quarterly interview series for Cream magazine, which I grew up reading Cream and Rolling Stone and Relics, and I've gotten to collaborate with all three of those amazing music publications. So that's been really, really heartwarming. I would also say getting an email from Phil Lesh from the Grateful Dead after he'd seen a show we'd done about Miles Davis, and he reached out and said, "Hey, we'd love to do something with you and the Grateful Dead." And going to watch when we launched our first Grateful Dead beer like 12 years ago, American Beauty, we launched it at a room called Terrapin Station, named after a Dead album up in the Bay Area that he and his sons, who are also amazing musicians, run. And meeting him that night, he came out and he's like, "Hey Sam, I got a brand new liver." He kind of patted his stomach. He said, "I got a new liver, so I can't drink, but I smoked one up in your honor. And believe me, my sons are having plenty of your beers on that stage tonight. So we're glad you're here." So that was a pretty heartwarming moment as a big deadhead.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
cool. So yeah, I mean, let's go into the Grateful Dead and the beer series. So I mean, obviously, it's a no-brainer to have that relationship. But I mean, what really has been that impact to you as, as a business and to you personally as well?
Yeah, so I mean now it's super rewarding. It's probably the most robust, intricate, dynamic, longest tenured music collaboration we have ever or will ever do. And now the centerpiece, rest in peace, Phil, and the centerpiece of that relationship is the relationship between myself and David Lemieux, who's the Grateful Dead's archivist and historian. I was just texting with him yesterday to celebrate a new track released by the great band Ween, Ween. They're doing an extended album release, I think, for the anniversary of their country album, and they had just put out this week a song about Jerry Garcia passing on. So I shared that with David Lemieux, and we had a great chat about it yesterday. So yeah, I mean, it's been the most rewarding, robust, multifaceted music collaboration we've ever done. So there's a text thread with me, my son Sammy, who's 25, a huge Deadhead, his best friend Dash, filmmaker who's a Deadhead, and David Lemieux, and we keep running lists of underrated live tracks from the Grateful Dead, and then from that text thread, every year we work with Record Store Day, and Dogfish has probably the official brewery have been 12, and now three times in a row we've released collaborative Grateful Dead, Dogfish Head albums on Record Store Day, featuring live tracks that my son and David Lemieux and we curate ourselves. So that's a really fun component. Not to mention the beautiful recipes themselves. And now those recipes, we decided to not just do them as a one-off in a big fancy champagne bottle, but as everyday drinking beers. And now our Dogfish Head Grateful Dead Juicy Pale Ale. Last year it was the fastest growing craft beer in all of America from any craft brewery. So that one's off to a great trajectory. And then this year we came out with a companion beer that the first one, the Juicy Pale Ale's an ale, but this year we came out with Citrus Daydream, and that's a lager infused with lime and fonio, which is kind of a fruity African grain.
So Grateful Dead was the first band that you collaborated with, and then was it Miles Davis was the next then? Is that kind of how chronologically it worked, or am I
I think it
missing
was
one?
no, I think it's actually the other way around. I think Miles
Okay.
was the first one because Phil Lesh saw the show about Miles Davis,
Oh, right, yeah.
that show that we did, and I think maybe the one we did with Pearl Jam came out before the first Grateful Dead one as well. So we did a beer celebrating the I think 10th anniversary of their first album 10.
So you had mentioned your first concert that you attended. So my first concert that I attended was in 1996. I'm a senior in high school. Alanis Morissette comes to Hershey Park Stadium for the Jagged Little Pill tour, right?
Wow, yeah,
And this little band from England called Radiohead opened
wow.
up for her.
And what year was that? 96?
96. And
So
so
the Benz was out yet, but none of their most iconic albums were out yet.
correct. But what was
Wow.
funny was is they were test running songs from OK Computer on that tour. So
Wow.
so of course Radiohead is my number one band, but Pearl Jam is number two. And you guys when this that collaboration came out, like I jumped out of my shoes. Talk about, I mean, I'm sure you have some good stories about that experience with Pearl Jam and dealing with the band personally, correct?
Well, and to be honest, I see your Radiohead poster behind you. They're one of my uh, favorite bands too. And like you, when I saw Joan Jett, she was opening for Bob Seger, and I can appreciate Bob Seger now, but I was more excited to see Joan Jett than I was to see Bob Seger. I'm guessing the same is for you between Radiohead and Alanis Morissette. Not to throw any shade at her, but I see your poster there. I do have to say, like, not every collaboration goes perfectly. And the Miles one did, the Grateful Dead ones obviously have. I mentioned Guided by Voices. I can go on and on, but the Pearl Jam one was a little disappointing because, basically they reached out to us, and it was the manager, not the band, reaching out to us,
Kelly
and they were
Curtis?
like, "Hey, Eddie Vedder's a big fan of what you guys." Yeah, and
Yeah.
they were like, "Eddie's a big fan of what you're doing. he saw the Miles thing and he wants to do this with you guys. And I was like, oh, this is awesome, but if we do it, we would love to work directly with Eddie, so it's an authentic, equal creative input collaboration. And they said, yeah, definitely. Eddie's all in, and I'm sure he had really good intentions, but they had so many things going on around the 10th anniversary of that album that at the end of the day, I got one sentence email from Eddie, and it said, "Hey Sam, love what you did with the Miles Davis thing. Um, um, for Pearl Jam, when you come up with a recipe, you just on stage we mostly drink uh, Pinot Noir, red wine, and Coronas. Can you make something that tastes like a blend of those?" So that's all I got for creative, guidance. So we did a beer made with black currants, and that fruit gave it like a red wine character, and we made it the same color and the same hopping level as Corona. But compared to like the super in-depth collaborations we've done with like the Flaming Lips and Grateful Dead, that Pearl Jam one was more superficial, frankly, and the karma made it so the beer wasn't frankly as exciting as some of the other ones. So it was a good learning experience. We're still proud to have worked with that legendary band that we love, but we wish we could do that collaboration over.
Yeah. The other one that I thought was amazing was this one. The positive
Oh,
contact, man. This beer
yeah.
is fantastic. Like any good stories with that with Dan?
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, Dan the Automator from Deltron 3030 has stayed a good friend, and when he named his kid Miles, and that's how that one started too. Was Miles Davis is kind of the connector in so many of these. But when we created a beer together with Dan the Automator, having learned from the Pearl Jam challenge, I said, Dan, I'd love to do this beer with you, but we're going to need to meet in person and drink together and create this beer together for me to want to do it. He's like, cool. And he's like, I'm in NYC because he mostly lives in Cali. He gave me a day he was in NYC that I could get up there. I met him at the rooftop of Italy, which is the great store that has a brewery that we helped design on the rooftop in New York City. And I brought like a cheese grater with me, different beers and ciders and wines and all these herbs and spices. And I started just grating or chopping up different culinary ingredients and making tinctures of them with beers and ciders. And that's how we aligned on that recipe that ended up being a beer cider hybrid with him. But the other really cool component of that collaboration is he's a huge foodie. So I reached out to a bunch of my chef friends and heroes, David Chang, Mario Batali, and a few others, and sent them samples of the beer and said create a recipe. And Deltron 3030 came out with an EP of all these special remixes of 4 songs to go with the recipe of the beer and to go with the 4-course dinner that was provided, the recipes from these 4 luminary chefs. So it was when you bought a case of that beer, it came with the vinyl EP in the case of that beer, and on the sleeve of the LP were the recipes from these 4 famous chefs, so that you could create like a killer dinner party where you're playing the album, drinking the beer, and pairing it with the recipes. So that was a really, exciting and unique collaboration for its time for sure.
Yeah, that's so cool. So I guess let's talk about then your this relationship that you have now with Touch Tunes. Really cool concept because, we keep hearing in the national media that no one's drinking under 30 and, no one's drinking under 25 and everybody's smoking now and all this stuff. Like, talk about like why you got involved with Touch Tunes and like, how you think that that can help out.
Yeah, I mean, so and for your listeners that might not know it, I'm sure most do, but it's basically like a new school sort of digital jukebox platform where a lot of great music centric restaurants and bars set up their a Touch Tunes, station at their venue. And so if there's not live music on the stage or they're not a music venue and they just like to have good music, that the customers can help curate what's being played on the sound system at that venue. And so, being a beer with a music problem, like this is super cool. Let's sponsor a Touch Tunes national program. So we have like 4,000, I think, participating venues, and we've curated like a list with Dave Lemieux of Dead songs. That's part of it. but people can go into an account and earn sort of a gift card from Dogfish Head to hang out with their friends and curate a list of songs that they're going to listen to in their session hanging out. And as you said, this is an era when 21 to 31-year-olds are drinking less alcohol than their cohorts of the same age group from the last 5 decades. So it's also our way of trying to encourage, younger people that might be more inclined to just net chicks and flip and chill in their house with one friend to say, you know what, no, tonight, Tuesday night, Thursday, I'm going to go out to this bar with a bunch of friends and we're going to have a blast and socialize and play a bunch of great music to bring us even closer together. So we just love the concept of it as a movable feast that at the heart of it is designed to bring music lovers together in a real space to enjoy each other's company over really good beers.
So a little bit off topic, but how do you, handle your relationship with your smartphone? Like, is it a struggle for you? Do you feel like you have to put it down sometimes, or do you have a healthy relationship with it?
No, I don't have a healthy relationship with it. I really want to work on my relationship with the robots in general, and so I'm trying to like designate certain hours of the day, and it's usually in the evenings. But like for example, my ritual in the morning is I go to Pitchfork, Stereo Gum, Brooklyn Vegan, The Quietus. So there's probably four or five music hits: Rolling Stone, Cream, and I over my coffee I get my because I do that because every morning after that ritual moment I decide what I'm going to play for my 1 hour paddleboard. So I'm a big I consider myself a water mammal that was forced by civilization to live on land. I'm happiest and my most creative ideas in a kayak, in a motorboat, or on a paddleboard. So I try for 60 minutes every morning to earn my 60-minute IPA calories for later that night by listening to an album on my headphones while I paddleboard in the harbor in Delaware or here up in Maine. And usually that's what I'm doing in the morning is reading about new album releases and reviews to inform what I'm going to listen to that day. But I have a pretty old iPhone that now dies at about 5 or 6 p.m., needs more batteries, and I try to just let it die and not charge it so that at least in the evenings I'm spinning vinyl, talking to my family, and not checking work emails or going to websites and on my phone.
So that's a good segue. So, I ask this often to musicians because I always feel it's fascinating. What is your ideal way that you like to listen to music? Are you, headphones? Are you in your car? Are you in your living room with nice speakers? Are you live music? Like, what's your ideal way that you like to listen to music?
Yeah, I would say, in different atmospheres, pretty much every single one that you've listed, but I'd say I'm bummed to say that I'm listening to my phone with Bluetooth, really, good Sony cans, like full air speakers over them, like I used to paddleboard. That's probably the majority of the time. But then, not quite every day, but almost every day, I turn on the record player, and I've got really good Macintosh speakers and Macintosh turntable, other a little bit cheaper the other components, but the speakers and the phonograph are sick, and so I look forward to the time with the vinyl every week. I don't get to it quite every day, but at least every other day, I'm revving up my record player. And then on long drives, the rule for my wife and I is whoever's driving gets to choose the music. And she drives more often than I do, so I'm listening to a lot of Taylor Swift and Olivia Rodriguez these days. Nothing wrong with that. I love them both. Um, and then I annoy her because I'll play like um, the Broken Record podcast by Rick Rubin, and I'll force her to listen to, a Nick Cave interview for an hour of our drive. So we each get our turns behind the wheel.
That's great. That's amazing. So, getting back to the music side of it with Dogfish, you talked about, how important relationships are. Chris Lausch is a big part of the music side of Dogfish. Talk about how you guys met and how that relationship still is thriving today.
Yeah, and I know you also know him from Pennsylvania, and but Chris Lausch, other than myself and Mariah, is the longest tenured person to get a paycheck from Dogfish Head. So I don't think he's ever officially been on our payroll, but he's acted as our music advisor, either formally or informally, since within a year of when we opened, I think 1996 or so, and helped us get so many of those artists that I've mentioned into our room and onto our stage. And he's a musician himself and a beer geek through and through, like travels to Italy and Japan and Belgium just for his love of beer. As fast he'll pack a suitcase for a beer trip as quickly as he would, to go see one of his favorite bands. So we share that passion for both beer and music. And Chris was really invaluable in helping us establish the live music program on our stage. And he's not involved in every show anymore, but he's still, every month I'm having emails with him about at least an upcoming show. And he probably helps leads on booking 10 to 20 shows for us a year.
Yeah. I mean, so, I would love to hear your opinion on this. What do you feel like the status of the music industry is currently? Because I mean, you're in your 50s, like you've seen a lot. Like where do you think the industry is?
Well, I mean, there's always great new music coming out. Where you find it might evolve, but there's always great new music coming out. I'd say I'm still as listening to music that's come out in the past 12 months as much as I am listening to music that came out in the hundreds of years before the last 12 months. I'm not like consciously like I gotta listen to new music today because I listen to old music yesterday. It's pretty informal with me. The dynamic, as you mentioned, has changed a lot in the professional realm. When you look at the juggernauts like a Live Nation or a Spotify and Amazon and how they impact the economics of live music, I'd have to say generally it's for the bad for the musicians, but I'd also have to say generally it's probably for the good for the just getting started music lover in terms of all the different places you can find music that you might fall in love with, and maybe you fall in love with it so much that you go see a live show by that artist or buy the vinyl by that artist, and then that's where it becomes economically more sustainable than just supporting the streaming services. So it's a challenging time, and when you go to gigs, go over to the merch table, buy a shirt, buy an album. Don't just go to the show, because that's how a lot of these bands are really staying viable. It used to be, uh, release the album, and that's the economic engine, and the live shows to promote, the albums. It's really kind of been reversed, where it's like the released music, streaming, etc., is there to support the more economic engine of the touring and stuff. So it's definitely a topsy turvy world when you think of the economics of music. But I don't think there's ever been a better time in history to be a lover of music in terms of having the history of music at your fingertips, literally.
So, I mean, I want to go back to the pandemic for a second because, obviously the world stopped, live music stopped. I had a fear that we would never get to go to a concert again. You know,
Yeah.
when you're going through that, like personally, as well as like, from a business standpoint, you know, what were your fears? And go back to that time. Like, how did you kind of react to how the world was reacting at that point?
Yeah, I mean, so like you, when it first went down, and we had hundreds of employees, coworkers in our hospitality businesses, and thankfully we were recognized as necessary workforce and allowed to do what we did. But we shifted quickly to had to be to go model or ecom model for a lot of what we did, and obviously we couldn't have live music on our stages, so we tried to just persevere and use our creativity for different platforms. So we, sponsored a lot of virtual concerts with Little Steven, with Mount Joy. I forget all the different bands that we worked with to promote virtual concerts. But frankly, that is like it was better than nothing. But it doesn't touch the experience of being in the actual room with the bands. So we were so glad when that there was light at the end of the tunnel from COVID, and we could start booking live music again. But just massive thanks to all the fans of Dogfish that went out of the ways to support, like when we released like a virtual box of beers or a virtual playlist, that they would get the stuff through ecom, and that really helped keep our company going during really challenging times. Same with so many other hospitality companies that had to pivot, like you mentioned.
Yeah. So the Analog a Go-Go event, talk about that to our listeners because again, kind of going back to the love of vinyl and just, kind of doing something that's a little bit different and off-centered. Talk about that event. And was that your idea or whose idea was that?
Yeah, that was my idea, and so there's a very rustic way of serving beer. I don't know but if anyone can see behind me, there's a beer engine, and when you hear the word beer next to engine, it means it's a way to softly serve draft beer, where you're not forcing the beer with CO2. You're drawing it naturally out of the keg, and the yeast is actually still in the keg and fermented the beer naturally, which makes for softer, finer bubbles, which makes for a beer that doesn't fill you up as much. It's not as gassy. And it's just an old fashioned analog way to serve and make beer. So I thought, well, what's the music equivalent of cask beer? It's definitely vinyl albums and records. That's analog music, right? So I wanted to combine my love of analog beer and analog music. So the go means it's both the music and the beer is analog. So we started a festival where we invited a bunch of our favorite indie record stores from up and down the East Coast to set up a table under a tent at the Dogfish Brewery, and next to them at every table we would set up a series of cask conditioned Dogfish Head beers, or every year we'd invite a different brewery, Victory and Yards and other breweries to as our guest analog brewer, so people could try stuff not just from us. And this year's no different. We'll be doing our Analog a Go-Go in early November. So check dogfish.com for upcoming news if you want to come hang out with us. And it's really turned into all things analog. It's got to be a music related company to come, but there might be like a guy that makes his own guitars, or a woman that sells vintage rock and roll t-shirts. So it's not just music vinyl purveyors. It's just music centric craftspeople and entrepreneurs set up at booths under a tent at the brewery, and we time it to kind of be before the holiday season so that people can be enjoying their drinks while they're shopping for their loved ones, getting their Hanukkah, Christmas gifts for the music lovers in their lives. So still my favorite weekend of the year. I can't announce it, but we have literally one of the OG hip hop bands in the whole global history of hip hop will be headlining Analog this year.
Hell yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, and then that kind of is a good segue to Record Store Day because you guys have been the official sponsor of Record Store Day, correct?
Yeah, I think we're on our 11th or 12th year as the
Yeah.
official brewery of Record Store Day. So it's one of our other than the Grateful Dead, it's probably our longest going musical relationship. So Carrie and Michael over there that started it, we have massive respect for them. And it's just so overlapping with the craft beer ethos. And when you think about what independent record stores are up against, it's so similar to what independent craft breweries are up against. We're up against Anheuser-Busch, Molson Coors, these global juggernauts, and those indie record stores are up against Spotify, Amazon, and those global juggernauts. So we have a lot in common, and we believe, together we are heavy. And so every year we work with we identify a really great artist who not only does the art for our seasonal beer series, but creates the official Record Store Day poster. And then we send that to every participating Record Store Day record store across the country. And that's become like a big part of the ritual of Record Store Day lovers, that they go to the store on that day and they collect that poster. And then we release albums in concert with Record Store Day. I mentioned the Grateful Dead ones, but now Record Store Day has really two big tent pole moments per year. There's still the traditional big Record Store Day, which is in April every year, but they wisely decided they should have one closer to the holidays. So now there's a Black Friday Record Store Day where there's a whole nother slew of releases that come out in limited edition runs on these two kind of tent pole moments twice a year. And it really just shows um, the it shows the values of the music community that so many famous bands from Metallica to Taylor Swift opt in and below market value are giving new albums in limited runs to Record Store Day just because they too are not just world class musicians but they're world class music fans and they want their indie record stores to stay viable. So they kind of there's great karma in giving back to that community, and we feel the same way at Dogfish Head.
So I guess from my question then for you is at your place in Maine and at your place in Delaware, where's the closest record store that you can drive to?
So for me, I can walk to a record store in Delaware. I mostly go to Vintage Underground in Lewis, Delaware, or Extended Play in Rehoboth. That one's more of a bike or a boat ride, but Vintage Underground, my daughter worked there. She's a big Kinks fan, and Nicki Minaj, she's all over the map. And then up here in Maine, it's a little harder. I'm on an island, but I can take a boat. And get to a vintage bookstore in the town of Bath, Maine, that has great used records. So I find them. I go out of my way to find them, but it's easier for me to do in Delaware than in rural coastal Maine.
Yeah. That record store that was in Rehoboth, that was on the corner where the Adeline store, I think, is now, like across from Nicola.
Yeah, that actually, when I said extended play, that's where that one moved to, and it used to be called Gidget's Gadgets,
Okay.
and now Gidget's Gadgets still sells, cool like toys and pop culture ephemera, but they moved their vinyl collection, both new and used, to a store up the road called Extended Play.
Okay. Gotcha. So I want to ask, because we lived in Rehoboth, like I've lived down there, like my parents have a house down there. You know, do you think that you would personally have as much success as you do, financially, personally, whatever, if you didn't live in Lower Delaware?
Probably not because we got lucky in that, we were brewing these really exotic beers for the mid 90s. We were really the first brewery in America to focus on unexpected culinary ingredients in recipes. It doesn't seem like such a crazy thing now when so many small breweries are making fruited sours and pastry stouts, but those kinds of styles really didn't exist in the mid 90s when we were doing beers like Raison d'etre with raisins and beet sugars or chicory stout with coffee and chicory. So we were really lucky in that we could hone our skills as brewers without like a spotlight of a already developed and maybe somewhat jaded craft beer scene. Like if we'd opened Dogfish Head in New York City or in Philly or in Denver or Portland, Oregon, where there was already kind of a craft beer scene and we're brewing these crazy beers, I think we probably would have not made it. But because we were kind of, in the middle of nowhere in terms of population, it allowed us to really hone our skills, prove our model. And being in coastal Delaware, it does seem like we're in the middle of nowhere. Our state really doesn't have an airport, or it only has three counties, has less than 1 million people. But from our facilities in coastal Delaware, we're just a 2 hour drive from DC, Baltimore, Philly, 3 hour train from Manhattan. So it's actually a great hub to make a really high end specialty gourmet beverage in, because you can get it to these big metro markets that are so close, but you don't have to pay the rent of opening the company in that metro market itself. So it was definitely a godsend for us that we started in this sleepy little coastal town in Delaware.
Well, and I mean, I think you had a say and a hand in bringing now. I mean, think about in your area 10 years ago, there wasn't Rock in the Docks. There wasn't the Freeman Arts Pavilion. There weren't these other music venues down in your area. Like it was you guys and the Bottle and Cork, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's been great to see the live music scene flourish in coastal Delaware and the brewing scene as well, right? So when I started Dogfish Head, we were the only brewery in the whole state. And back then, 31 years ago, that Route 1 corridor in coastal Delaware was still mostly corn and soybean farms, not supermarkets and strip malls. So, for example, when I used to ride my bike home, which I'd never do today, on Route 1 between the towns of Lewis and Rehoboth, when we started, we were the only brewery in the whole state. Now, if I were to ride my bike between our pub and our house, I would pass five breweries on the way from my brewery to my house. So, if you ever asked me when I started Dogfish, do you think you'll ever ride your bike past five other breweries in this little state someday to get to your brewery? I could never imagine it because when we opened Dogfish Head, there were only 600 commercial breweries in America, and now there's 10,000. So it's really gone much like hip hop and punk rock kind of started out on the periphery and was this niche American art genre. As craft beer kind of started as this niche genre and is now kind of at the heart of American culture.
Yeah, I mean that's a good segue because I want to talk about that. You wrote a Rolling Stone article, which by the way is fantastic, about the three,
Oh, thank
pillars
you.
that happened in 1976. Kind of give the audience, a taste of what that article was about.
Yeah. So, I just was thinking about it where, the Ramones are considered the band that launched a thousand other punk bands, because their first album came out in 1976, which is obviously a very patriotic year, other than this year, the most patriotic year in most living people's memory, possibly. And it happened to also be the year that the first woman in hip hop was featured on an album and on national TV when Funky 4+1 played on Saturday Night Live, and then that same year also was when Jack McAuliffe opened the first, from scratch craft brewery in America, which is called New Albion. Much like many hip hop and punk rock bands, New Albion's not around, but that doesn't mean they weren't, existentially important to the trajectory of craft beer. And so in this time that we're celebrating another patriotic year, because I'm buddies with Rolling Stones CEO and we were working on a whiskey together. I told the CEO about the fact that 1976 was this year when these three American art genres, hip hop, punk rock, and uh, craft brewing, essentially started at the same time. And I gave him a little bit of what the tentpole moments were. He's like, "Holy shit, you should write a story for us about that." And so I didn't know I'd be writing it for their patriotic summer July 4th issue, and the story either before or after me is Obama wrote for that issue. So I'm in pretty great company. But yeah, super proud that I got to tell that story in Rolling Stone magazine.
Yeah, so I mean, we got to see you down at South by. You were promoting for down there. How did this Rolling Stone kind of collaboration come about, or this, kind of partnership? And I mean, obviously, it's got to be exciting for you because, like me, I grew up. I had a Rolling Stone subscription for years. Like I look forward to, opening the
Yeah.
magazine every month. It was great.
Yeah, and there was a little store in Greenfield, Massachusetts, that called the Inkwell, and it was like a classic old smoke shop and magazine and newspaper shop, and it had the bus station right out in front of it, like most small towns where their newsstand is. And so I, at the earliest age, buying Billboard magazine, Cream, Rolling Stone, Crawdaddy,
Then,
Relics eventually. So
yeah.
yeah, I now write a quarterly series for Cream magazine, and Lester Bangs was probably my favorite music journalist that came out of Cream, and then Rolling Stone, that they reached out to us actually, and said, we see what you're doing with all these bands. You want to talk about doing something with Rolling Stone magazine? And so it started a wonderful relationship that now we just announced this week we're doing a collaborative whiskey in celebration of the country's big anniversary, but we're also the official brewery of the Stateside Festival, which is, Rolling Stone's the oldest rock and roll magazine in our country. Next year it'll celebrate its 60th anniversary. And so for us to be the first brewery to do like this, a whiskey with them, is really heartwarming. We're doing the stateside concert with them this coming holiday weekend with Noah Khan as the headliner. And then I can't give too much away other than to say myself and the CEO of Rolling Stone, Julian, have become great friends, and we're already scheming on bigger and bolder collaborative components to our relationship next year.
Yeah. Well, and I'm assuming you'll be back at South by next year, or is that too early to say?
I hope so. I had a blast down there, so I hope to make it to back to South by, and I always feel very at home in Austin.
Yeah, it's I mean this was our 10th year going to South by, and it really is one of my favorite cities outside of like, in the world. I mean, it's amazing. Like the people, the food, the music, the
Totally,
venues. It's a really good combination
totally
of
agree.
everything.
Yep, it's a fun loving city. It's an arts and music loving city. So I always love getting there every chance I can.
Yeah. So I got to ask you, man, like you have so much on your plate. I'm sure the normal person would ask, like, how does this guy balance his work and life? Like, how do you do that, or is that still a work in progress after all these years?
Well, I mean, you can see what a shithole my office is here. It's just like magazines, newspapers, but Dylan book, a Warhol book, Thoreau here, boat maintenance here, Maggot Brain, which is the White Stripes magazine. Let's see, Under the Radar, which is a rock and roll magazine. So I'm still really, really analog. I write my notes. I try not to be on a computer much as I can, as much of the day. So I'm super disorganized, but I must have undiagnosed ADD, because I just love doing creative things and doing different things. So I'm most thankful for my wife Mariah, who's way more organized than I am, and keeps this household running while I'm doing all these crazy things. And then my coworkers, the brewers, the distillers, the content creators, the guys who film and get out our social feeds. They really are able to amplify the creative projects that I proudly take part in bringing to life, but they're the ones that give oxygen to them and make the life thrive. So I know I'm just one of many on the Dogfish team contributing, but I'm really lucky that I get to contribute in the ways that I know I have some skills, on the creative and storytelling and recipe sides, but there's so many areas of the work that we do that I don't have any skills in HR and Excel spreadsheets and PowerPoints and stuff. So I'm very thankful that we have a bunch of folks with complementary superpowers fighting evil shoulder to shoulder.
Well, and I mean, often, you hear about in history, right? Businessmen often that are ideas men aren't always successful, but you've been able to like combine both of those. Is that just because you've surrounded yourself with good people, or is it more to that?
I think surrounding myself with good people is at the heart of it. And again, starts with my wife, Mariah, who was the original digital voice of our company and grew our social media following from 0 to 1.2 million followers. That was all Mariah before she handed over those reins. She also developed Beer and Benevolence, which was our community oriented program to give back to, nonprofits, particularly in the arts and environmental causes. So she's, I think, just as much at the heart of our success as I am. I also think it was a timing thing, right? We started a brewery in 1995, kind of before that was cool, and then kind of, celebrity chef and that world kind of took off, and running a restaurant was no longer like this weird little blue collar nichey thing. It became a recognized as an art, an avenue for creative expression. So props to our forebearers like Alice Waters and James Beard and the people that were championing American culinary creativity long before Dogfish existed. So we were really benefited from the moment in culture when brewers and makers and chefs could be celebrated, and it wouldn't sound pretentious to call what we do art anymore. So we've got really the benefit of the timing as much as us creating a really unique brand in this community.
Hmm. So I want to talk about the So Far Sound relationship because again, this is, extending that musical branch that, people think of with Dogfish. How did that relationship come about?
Yeah, so we have a great national sales leader, Brian McNeil, who kind of keeps his pulse on the kinds of venues we hope not just our Grateful Dead beers get served at, but like 60 Minute, our number one beer, we want to be part of the conversation for musical venues too. I just got to speak at a conference of independent music vendors in Minneapolis like a month ago. And So Far Sound was there and part of that as well. So we just had a long relationship with them because they kind of, without naming any names of the giant live music, juggernauts that they compete with, there's so many smaller indie venues that need attention and love from brands like Dogfish Head. So we're focusing more of our energy on that than trying to get into Madison Square Garden or on the payroll of one of these massive venue groups or ticketing groups that are often intertwined with each other. It was a way for us to, much like what we do with Record Store Day, to say, we believe in the indie record store's entrepreneurial journey. So Far Sounds allows us to say we believe in the independent vendors, our venues journey as well. So how do we help create a bigger voice and amplify awareness for that? And So Far Sound really fits that bill.
Do you feel like the merger with Boston Beer Company then helped you and opened these doors for some of these musical like endeavors, or do you feel like you could have like this would have happened anyway, maybe?
I think a lot, like, Record Store Day was happening before this. Our collaborations with bands was happening before this. But what they did help us understand is how to negotiate like a bigger craft brewery with the kind of entities that might be also talking to a bigger brewing company. Now, we don't have the purse strings of some big beer brands, but we can at least now have meetings and provide data on the demographics of our drinker, the reach of our brand, and those kind of data-driven metrics was something Dogfish Head was not really great at putting together before we merged with Boston Beer, which has way better resources, just bigger resources than we had to kind of button up the way we come into these meetings and negotiations. But we still come into them as music lovers first and sort of business people second. And Boston Beer, Jim Cook appreciated that. That's why he wanted to do the merger. He loved how art focused and sort of social media and events focused Dogfish Head was, and felt that our other brands could kind of learn from our approach on those components of business, the grassroots ones, just as Dogfish could learn from Boston Beer on the more, professional quarterly programs and meetings with chains and that kind of stuff. So it was very symbiotic, and we're so glad that we moved forward on that merger now 7 years ago.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned about the NIVA conference. I mean, they're doing God's work. I mean, really for these venues, and especially with this the Ticket Act too. Hopefully that gets passed because, as you know, as a
Yeah,
concert goer, it's a nightmare trying to
hard.
go to see concerts anymore. And it's like, such a pure art form to have that much like, just crud and just dirtiness behind it. It just drives me nuts. Like, do you feel that way too?
Yeah, I totally do. So I followed that story too, and my buddy Dean, who's the publisher of editor in chief of Relics magazine, wrote an amazing book about that dynamic, centered on Live Nation, and it's great to see the attention that drew and action starting to take place in Washington D.C. and beyond, that we're all hopeful for a more level playing field.
Yeah. I mean, just personally, have you ever thought about running as in a political career, like down the road, or is that not for you?
Definitely not for me. I'm
Okay.
not like a very good manager of people. I love collaborative, creative projects, but I'm not a very good manager of people, and I'm not very good at accountability. I say I'm going to do something this year, but maybe I end up doing it 2 years from now, or I just blow it off because I got excited about something else. So I don't always keep my word on creative concepts and bring them to life on certain timelines and stuff. So I don't think I'd be apt to thrive in the mindset of what you'd have to do to be a successful politician. My hat's out to the work that they do, but that's not the work for me.
I understand that. I mean, but going back to 1995, you there was a lot that you had to do politically just to even get this off the ground. I mean, not to go through all that history, but I mean, you've definitely had to deal with politics throughout your career.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I didn't even know. I was so naive that it was illegal to open a brewery in the state of Delaware because it's a state by state basis. After Prohibition was lifted, they let every state decide. They had to write their own legislation to make it legal again. So I started building Dogfish Head in the building. I bought all the equipment, and somebody's like, "You can't open a brewery in the state." So I quickly had to learn how to work with politicians and wrote my own, with the help of a local lawyer. I wrote my own statutes and argued for them on the floor of the Senate and the House in Delaware. And that's so I got a real quick taste of the world of politics, and gave me a lot of respect for the people that can navigate that universe, because it certainly helped us a lot. Dogfish wouldn't exist if they didn't work quickly to help me change the laws there, and we went on to write the statute for craft distilling and the microbrewery statute, the brew pub statute. So we have had a hand in writing a lot of legislations, but I wouldn't want to be a legislator.
You want to just attend festivals, right?
Exactly. And in fact, I'm going to have to leave you in 2 minutes because I have to get on a FaceTime about dry hopping a beer here.
That's amazing. Well, have fun at the Stateside Festival this weekend. I appreciate you doing this. You have so many other things that you could have done today on a Tuesday. No, what today is today? Thursday?
Monday,
Monday. Shit,
a
it's
sunny
Monday.
Monday. Well, I know I'm going to
Holiday
have beer.
week, man.
Well,
America's
I'm
champion.
doing this thing at 4:15 here to dry hop a beer, but it's really also my excuse to actually drink the beer that I'm dry hopping. So once again, I'm gonna combine my hobby and my vocation and make some beer while I drink some beer.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. Before you leave, so we went to Goose last night at Merriweather, right? And we stopped at
Wow, yeah.
amazing, of course. But so we stop at a little six pack place, and there's Apra Hop.
Whoa, that's right. We brought back Aprop.
Oh my God. I was like, oh my God. So it's delicious, by the way. It's so
All right. You're already having one. You started without me, dog, but I'm about to join you.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I know. I was so surprised. Like, wow, like they brought back Apra Hop. Like now Burton Baton. That's all we need.
Yeah, we keep our ears open on our social to what beers from our past fans are asking us to bring back. So that's a reminder to your listeners to tune into Dogfish Head social media. And if there's a blast from the past that you'd like to see us bring back, don't be afraid to holler at us.
Yeah, that Burton Baton, man, that was by far my favorite beer that I've ever had from Dogfish. So
I
thank
have a
you for
feel
making it.
I have a feel we'll make that one again someday.
Well, Sam Calagione, thank you so much for doing this. Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, our social media pages. That helps us. That helps the bands, artists, and brewers during all of these episodes. Also, check out our sponsor, RAR Outfitters. That's RAWR, outfitters.com. Don't just wear, RAR. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, I've been Dog. You've been great. This is the Music Lab Podcast.